welcome back to On the Workbench. Today we're going to build a stand for our vise. You may have seen in a previous episode, I acquired a couple months ago a large, heavy-duty metalworking vise that I've used for a variety of things. Not everything's been on my channel that I've used it for, but it sits on my workbench, and I realize this is going to be ironic for a channel called On the Workbench, but it's just been kind of in the way of other things I needed to be able to use my workbench for. And so I thought it would be nice to have a nice dedicated stand. So today we're going to build a stand for my vise that looks like this. The vise stand I'm showing you here is a little fancier than what you might want to need, but you can do this really cheap, really simple. The basic materials that we're going to use for our vise stand is going to be one 2x4 and two 2x8s, all 8 feet long. If your base is of slightly different dimensions, you may have to change up your size. Alternatively, the one 2x4 could be replaced with one 4x4. As for the hardware, we're going to use some lag screws and washers to build fashion our vise down. We're also going to need a drill and some screws and some wood glue, as well as some clamps and a chop saw. Alternatively, you could use a hand saw, but I'm going to use a chop saw to cut my lumber down to length. Now, after our work at the chop saw, we should have two 2x4s that are 3 feet long and four 2x8s that are also 3 feet long. And then we're going to begin by laminating the two 2x4s together to make a single, essentially a 4x4. You could obviously replace this with a 4x4 if you had that, but this was just a simple way to minimize my waste. For the glue up on the legs, the setup of my clamping table is going to be like this. I'm actually going to have to add a space underneath these fences here to raise them up a little bit off the table so I can actually get between the joint between these 2x4s to get everything all squared up. If I had another fence, I'd do the same thing on the other side, but I've only got two fences. And then I've got a push clamp here holding this back. If this were longer, I'd put this at the end to get the force going back. These toggle clamps will go down to hold the wood together once I apply the wood glue. So now, time for glue. After checking all my glue up after about 25-30 minutes, I was a little disappointed to look at the gap I had between the boards, so I backed the screws out, removed the hold-down clamps from the clamping table, and went back to the good old-fashioned F-style woodworking clamps that I've got, and I've got set up like that, and we'll let that set up the rest of the night. Okay, now with our beam having set up overnight, you can go ahead and take off all the F-clamps. So now with our center beam here all glued together, all we have to do now is start to put on the sides to get this squared up. Okay, so now with the center beam here on its side, I'm going to take each of the legs and lay them on one side, and I'm going to mark a couple spots and pay attention to the edge so I don't hit the other screws, where I want to pre-drill this board to be able to get some screws to go through so I can glue it and screw it down the center member. Now after a bunch of drilling, I've got along one edge here of every board, I've got my pre-drilled holes that I used to be able to use as clamps. I think that'll work better rather than the non-pre-drilled ones that I did before. Pocket holes here to hold everything square together. And I've got this on 1, 2, 3, 4 boards. Here's my center column that I glued together earlier. And so now we just have to assemble these together and add some glue. There's a little oopsie. I realized I actually forgot to drill out my holes here, so I'm going to have to come back and do that now. So pardon me while I come back and fix my mistake. There we go. Now we've got all the sides put together, so let's look at this in profile. So now in profile, we've got a design that looks like this, and our vise will mount right on top of that. There'll be a few more finishing details here in just a moment. Here's a quick view of what the mounted vise will look like on here. Obviously we've got to finish up a few more details here, but here's just a quick interim view, just verifying the fit works. And I can come back here with a Sharpie and then mark my holes, but I've got to be able to level out these ends here to make sure that everything will sit nice and tight and level on the square to the floor. So if you look closely at the detail here, you can see everything here. I try to get as close as possible here on the outside to get everything square. Still just not quite perfect, so we'll come back with a belt sander here and just flatten that out. I've got some marks here from where my vise is going to mount here on top. And we'll also come back here with the sanding block. We'll just quickly sand off some of the edges here, and then we'll come back and fill those holes. I'm going to come back with some spackling compound, and I'm just going to be able to put the spackling compound right in the hole, like that. Completely optional. You could also use some dowels, or you could buy the pocket hole fillers, but spackling compound will work just fine. After letting our parts dry overnight, now we're ready to come back and start our final assembly. So we've got our molding pieces here. Again, those are completely optional, but I'm just doing it to add a decorative flair to it. And we got our base. So now the next step is going to be pre-drilling the holes for the bolts, as well as getting the compressor ready so we can go ahead and throw those strips on with a nail gun. Now with the edges attached, you can see the nice red stripes all the way around my stand. And so now we've got to pre-drill out the holes for the vise. I got the vise on here. I'm going to use this as a drilling template. Then I'm going to drill these out and come back and bolt it on, and we'll be done. Now with the bolts all clean, I've got them pre-started here, just sitting in the holes here. Now I'm going to come back with my ratchet and tighten them up. So now with all my bolt heads in, I've got the vise down, and with this loose in here, I can now spin my vise 360 degrees so I can figure out which way is going to be forward or front. So one of the things I like about this, the way I've got this set up here, is I can take and have something hang off over the edge, because if you look on the way the side is here, the way that jaw is lined up there should be able to give me some overhang. The way that jaw should be able to let me have material overhang on the edge. I can also spin it around, whichever way I want to work. You know, if I need to make this a little more sturdier on the bottom, I certainly can by adding some wings to the feet, but I just want something in here that'll let me do what I use this vise most for, just for bending, twisting pieces of metal. And then I'm going to add one more accessory to the stand. So the accessory that I'm going to add is this set of expanding jaws. I found these on clearance at the big green box store the other day. and I thought I might just go ahead and add this onto the stand. It looked interesting. I don't know how useful it'll be, but it looked like it might make the vise a little more useful. And for just a little over $5, I thought it seemed like a pretty good deal. This is made by a company called MaxTech, called a Vise Mate, and it's got a ruler built in here. Let's see if we can get the little tag here off the top. Out. There we go. Slide that off. But now we got these jaws. So one at the bottom here is fixed, that's screwed in there, and the other one here is a free floating jaw. So you can sit here and then expand this out with your vise by putting these into your vise and expanding this out to expand the capacity. So let's take this over to the vise and see how it'll work. So now I've got this set up here on the jaws. This is set for a these require a 4-inch vise. This is a 4.5-inch wide jaws, and this adds an extra couple inches, about 2 inches onto the width of your jaws, letting your material lay flat across the top here. So now if I needed to do something to the middle of this board here, I've got this laying flat, so it'll basically add 2 inches on either side and gives you a way to clamp flat as opposed to your jaws clamping vertically. There's also grooves in the side here if you want to put a piece of pipe in there just to be able to give you some jaws to hold it vertically. Within your jaw, within the plastic jaws, you got the ruler here. They'll tell you how wide these jaws are here. So I've got this little board here that's about 9 inches long, just a piece of scrap that I'm placing in there. So then with that accessory, I will then set up a hook and hang this on the side of my vise stand. So now with that in place, you can see how I'm able to fit my vise between my drill press and my table saw. I can also pull this out, rearrange it with my air compressor. I'm still not sure of the exact location, but my dimensions for this were so that I can just place this in a couple of different nooks and crannies in my shop and move it when I need it. The total weight of this is the weight of the vise plus approximately, I guess if I had to ballpark it, to be about 25 to 30 pounds. When finished, here's my scraps that are left from my material. I've got 2 pieces of my 2x8s, 1 piece of 2x4, some end cutoffs, and that's it. And in my case, I also have a little bit of extra from my molding that I'm not showing here since that's completely optional. But with this project here, the total material cost is maybe a little less than $20 if you choose not to paint it or add the molding.
So here's one final look at the vise as we walk around it. Hope you found this video useful, and have a great day.